Hey beautiful family, the topic I am about to speak on is a very emotive topic at this time. And so before I start, I want to take a moment to offer an abundance of love from my centre to whomever is listening to me. And I want you to know I'm speaking from my heart and from my love, and I'm staying true to that. And keep that in mind as you listen to me. Right now, many persons are saying that we are part of a great awakening. They feel that the protests against the legislation for the coronavirus pandemic, against the legislation for mandatory vaccine, etc., is part of this great awakening, and that this will liberate us from being imprisoned by society and its corruption. I have to say that I don't think this is correct, and I think that we are playing out another program of the Matrix, and we need to find the true awakening so as we can actually find what we're seeking, so as we can actually find the liberation that we want. Now, if you are already uncomfortable with what I've said, let me say straight off, if this is the great awakening that's going to change society, why is it that those of us who are protesting, those of us who are seeing something in the system we don't like, those of us who are saying that we feel we've been deceived, we feel we're being manipulated, we feel that society's been steered in a direction we have no say in, and we're trying to have a say in it? Why were humans doing that in the last generation over different topics, the generation before in different topics? I myself in this life have felt and done exactly the same thing, and felt like it was a great awakening when it was the war on terror. In the time of Rome, when they did the census, people felt exactly the same. And here we are still inside the same chaotic system. So if this behavior, if this story is repeating inside our society over and over again, generation after generation, different civilization, different technology, different time, different generation, same behavior, same storyline, how is it an awakening? Because the reality is, it's playing out another program inside the Matrix. Now, let me explain something that I think offers me a different perspective to most people. I am very blessed that I went to a part of the world where there was no municipality, and I've built a village. I was the first man to decide this, and I built a village that now provides a loving home for more than 200 people. There was nothing, there was no way for sewerage to be dealt with, there was no water, there was no electricity, there were no paths, there was no accommodation, there was no security. And so I built everything up with the team from scratch. So when I'm in Europe, I'm totally aware and conscious of what municipalities do to make us who we are. Whereas most who have lived here are not conscious of it because it's so many generations since we didn't have them. You don't realize what being able to flush your toilet, what being able to switch on the power or turn on the tap and have clean water does to make you who you are. It gives you so much freedom to develop and grow and have this more aware, enlightened consciousness. Without it, you're in survival all the time. It's very different. And so when we built these municipalities, which are the foundation of the matrix of society, we built them, and after some time we realized we needed to be able to monitor how many people were using them, how many need water, how many need waste disposal. After some time further, persons using those municipalities started to misbehave and hurt one another, steal and murder. And so the idea was that we would give ourselves an identity inside that municipality system, inside what is the foundation of the matrix, and we would give this identity to be able to track and monitor these expressions of human life within inside those municipalities. And so my birth certificate says I'm John St. Julien. But he is a concept of the foundation of the municipalities that is the European system. He is a concept of society. John St. Julien, I can't get him to do anything. He's a identity that I need to move around inside the municipalities that allow us to survive. Now, many feel the system was designed as a prison, but they are feeling something, but they are not quite there in my view. The system feels like a prison because they are allowing the identity of the system to become the dominant identity. Collectively by now, not only do we have persons believing they are only the identity the system gave them, but we are collectively doing it. And we have this collective delusion of the foundation of municipality, the identity we assigned ourselves to monitor us within there, and the sovereign identity, which we have all been. We have all been the sovereign identity at some point, has been forgotten. Now, when you were a child, before you learned concept of self and other, before you knew where your body ended and the world began, you were your sovereign potentiality. You were pure attention. You were an occurrence of the world around you, just as a cloud blowing in the wind or a tree growing in the forest. You were plugged in as a continuance of that expression. Now, as you grew up, you were given these labels and this societal identity, and you separate from there, from the sovereign self. But we can go back there, and I'll get onto that. I'll get onto that shortly. So right now we have people protesting the system. And most of them are protesting as the identity that the foundation of municipalities or the matrix has given them. And they are saying that events are being manipulated and orchestrated by persons to steer the matrix, the municipalities, in a certain direction. And they sense that there's some deception and dishonesty going on. And they sense that they are going to be having to do things they don't agree with. And so they are responding to that. But is this going to change the system? Because people were doing that in the time of Rome, and the system still is chaotic. People were doing it 90 years ago with World War II, and the system is still chaotic. Now, if you believe that this is orchestrated, there must be an architect. And that architect, if living inside that matrix and also believing upon the identity the matrix gave them, is also in a state of delusion. So you don't know what's driving those guys. You don't know what's driving them. Maybe they think that the human species will always be primitive and there'll always be murderers and rapists, so they want to surveil us so heavily and beat us into behaving in their concept of a more moral sense using technology and surveillance. Maybe they think humans are going to wreck the planet because we're so primitive and selfish, and so they want to coerce us into living a different type of life in smart cities so as we don't destroy the only environment we have to live in. We don't know the drive of those persons if they are living in the collective delusional matrix as well. Now, the other factor could be that they are rooted in the sovereign identity, and in that sovereign identity, they are being guided in some which way, shape or form by another aspect of self in consciousness. And in the sovereign identity, you do receive guidance which tends to work out. You receive mystic guidance. Now, the problem with trying to change the system from within the system, the problem with protesting the chaos of the system with the chaotic identity, is that you are trying to change it with concepts and ideas from that identity. So right now, those protesting are protesting for justice. And justice is a human concept and can't transform society. It can't do it. It's where does justice exist? When you're the sovereign identity, you can see justice doesn't exist except inside the identity of the municipality-rooted human. And so you can't transform the matrix from within inside the concepts that you have as a matrix identity. You can only transform it, as within the movie, Neo unplugs from the matrix and then plugs back into the matrix with more power to change it because he's awoken to his potential. Right now, the only way to transform society is with a transformative force, not with a concept. So you must leave the matrix and your identity within the matrix and find the sovereign identity. And then you can see that the only way you can transform that chaos that keeps repeating, generation after generation, they're protesting and saying, if you took these humans out and did it my way, we're deluded and we believe that everybody would agree with my way and everybody would do it and quite happily not protest and attack my way. But this is likely what some of those persons thought. And this is the problem we face. It's delusional. It's repeating behavior. It's playing out a program in the matrix. Persons believe they are in a state of awakening, but it's a program of awakening within inside the delusional ideal of the municipality self. And so Neo unplugs from the matrix and comes back in with the power to control it. What will transform the matrix, the society we live in? A force. What force will transform it? Compassion. Compassion will do it, because what we are saying when we are inside the municipality identity and we see something and we say, I'm not sure this is going the way I want, and I think some people are manipulating me to get me to go the way that they want me to go. We are saying we want truth. We are saying we want openness and honesty. But the reality is, we know as the matrix identity, as the persona given to us by the need to manage the municipalities and the foundation of society built on there, we know that we are disingenuous. We know that we are dishonest. We know somewhere inside us that that means that others can do that too. And what we want is for them to be honest. But when we live inside the identity of the municipalities of the matrix, we protect the image of self. So when we meet a person, we engage a process of thinking of something to say to make sure that they like us, and it creates disingenuousness. So when we bring that into the system, the collective delusion now is that many don't even know the sovereign identity exists. And so this chaotic matrix is just ongoing, because we haven't actually awakened to our true identity. And our true identity is the sovereign self outside of that matrix. Now, if we do that and we acknowledge that you can't change the system, because we haven't, we've tried to fight for justice generation after generation and the system has not changed, because justice is a concept of the character that the matrix tells you you are, then we can unplug from the matrix, go to the sovereign self and say, how do I transform it? Well, you transform it with a force which is transformational, and compassion, I think, is the force we're seeking, because what we want is honesty and truth. Now, right now, people inside the matrix protesting say, you're not being fair and you're going to imprison me forever. So okay, let's take those persons and their plan out of the equation. Who replaces the guidance of society? Who gives it the new plan? Who makes society into the more compassionate society? Well, it can only happen if we all collectively agree to disconnect from the delusional identity and connect to the true sovereign self, and make it a daily necessity that collective society roots itself in the true sovereign self, where we receive what is a stillness, a peace, this light of silence that can allow us to have a compassionate, honest, heart-resonated society. And the longer we stay playing the game of the matrix, compassion isn't grown or born from within there. And so because it's not grown and born from within there, we can't transform society. We can't transform society by responding to the program of the matrix with our matrix identity. And so this is not an awakening. This is a repetition of human failing to awaken. That's where we are. And people don't like to hear it. People want to go back into the details of the program of the matrix and say, but I don't want the mandatory vax, I don't want this. And it's okay. People didn't want the Roman census too, but did they not wanting what the chaotic matrix manifesting and all of the things within there, the need for control and power, etc., which is the want for freedom, that we incessantly repeat this journey with different framework. It never changed because we refused to awaken. We refused to disengage from the allure of the municipality identity and come back in with the power that the movie The Matrix tells you about. And I think many people feel, oh, I've had this awakening, and they've gone into an awakening program still inside the Matrix. I see many spiritual YouTubers also feeling that this is an awakening, and it's a type of awakening. People are seeing, I'm not happy about this, and people think that the whole municipalities were built to imprison them. But what they're sensing is that the identity that the municipalities requires you to have has become dominant over the sovereign self. So they are imprisoned by the system, but it doesn't mean the system intentionally did that. There are elements of the system which are unjust, the central banks and so on and so forth. But the identity loss and the delusion of believing on that identity gives the feeling of imprisonment. And the only way to liberate from there is to go to the light of silence. Now, we have all been sovereign, and to be sovereign again, you have to be simply attention. And when you become pure attention, your matrix identity just disappears. It just goes away. And what happens is we agree with things that we hear about compassion and love, but we agree with the matrix identity and we don't experience it. And I see people around me like this. They chop and change their view every day because they are agreeing and seeing it from the matrix identity. But when you do that, you become egoic and you name call and you use abusive terminology and you don't use compassion, because the sovereign self will bring compassion. So you'll have people calling one another sheeple, and you'll have people making fun of people who have believed upon the vaccine. You'll have people making fun of people who have believed this, and it's not bringing compassion into the situation, meaning that they never really left the matrix identity, because when you go to the sovereign self, compassion is the natural response to it. So when you see that and you look at what's going on, and you see that the protests are often coming from the persons believing they are simply the municipality identity, then what you are saying is there's a chaotic system that is disingenuous and dishonest, and we want to transform it. But you are saying, I'm going to use concepts and ideals of this character to do it, and you can't. You must unplug and come back in with compassion, with the power that Neo came back in with in the movie. With that stillness, that awareness. The fact that you don't engage with the illusions of the system. You don't engage with the fears that we have. And right now, if you look at what's going on, what people are doing is they are engaging in a game of thought. People are afraid of the unknown, which is what largely the future is. We don't know the driving factors behind persons who want to do certain things on the planet. And so the unknown is what we fear. But you can't fear what you don't know, so what you fear is what you think about the unknown. And so this is a trap of the matrix identity again, because you fear your own thoughts. And now, because of technology, we're all getting together and fearing our own thoughts of the unknown together collectively. And the reality is, the only way to stop that chaos, the only way to end it, is to fully awaken society. And to truly awaken society, we have to collectively agree that there is a sovereign identity outside of the societal identity that the need for managing municipalities gave us. And when we can agree to that and we can connect to that, we can teach our children, every day you must connect to this identity and make sure that you know this identity should be the driving force. Because in history we allowed the identity, the delusional identity of the municipalities, the matrix identity, to drive us, and it became chaotic. And this is where we are. This is exactly where we are. And this is why I don't see this as a great awakening. I just see it as a repetition of society playing out its matrix programs. Different technology, different generation, different time, different looking society, same behavior, same story, same awareness. And I know that there is a genuine issue with what is looking like a deep problem with our future democracy if we continue in this road that we are on. But I don't see that changing unless we have the awakening. And if we keep believing that we're in an awakening when we're playing out a program of the Matrix, I don't see how this ever stops. Because in 100 years we'll be doing the same thing. In 100 years after that we'll be doing the same thing. Because we're not waking up. We might be saying, these humans are not behaving how I want them to. Okay. They're not behaving, but what do they identify as? Do they identify as their sovereign self, and have they been guided by a spiritual force to do that? Or do they identify as their matrix self, as the concept of the municipality foundation, and they are in a state of absolute delusion because they've lost connection with themselves, in which case, if they are unrooted from self, then society will continue. Because it's unrooted from the natural sovereign state, it'll continue to destroy the planet. It'll continue to have war and chaos, because the mind can only be chaotic when it doesn't know that sovereign state. Because in that sovereign state, when you enter a state of pure attention, all thought goes away. When you try to pay attention as the concept of what the system told you are, if I try to pay attention as John, then I can't. Attention is a purity. It's a pure happening. And there is no thought there. So when you go there, the matrix identity falls apart. It falls away. And so this is why I don't think this is a great awakening. I think it's another program of the matrix. And I think if you want to stop this, then what you have to seek and what we are asking for is an honest and true society. And that can only come from transformation, and seeking justice is not a transformational force, so it's another dead end. So if you want to transform society, you have to find the home of a transformational force, and compassion is the one. Compassion is the force that we can transform it with. And if we can go into the light of silence, you will see that in there is a spirit, an energy that wants to raise the vibration of the planet. It wants to raise the vibration of that matrix. It wants to do that, but we're stuck in a low vibration because we refuse to unplug from it. And there are those now listening to me who will still be too allured by the matrix and its stories, by the municipalities and its journey, and will say that I'm wrong and that they don't need to unplug from there. They need to fight inside that chaos with their chaos and keep feeding it. And keep feeding the journey and the story. And so this is not the awakening that many hope it is. Because the awakening would mean that we all seek compassion to transform society. We wouldn't try to do it with the concepts of the chaotic identity, like justice. What we want is truth. Truth is found in compassion. And where do you grow compassion? Not inside that identity, but in a state of pure attention. Not concentration. Because concentration is duality. You're fighting against non-concentration. Not being aware of the moment, but attention. It requires no one to be there for it. Pure attention is the sovereign self. Pure attention will melt your matrix identity. And from there, we can grow that transformational force of compassion, and we can change the matrix before us. God bless, guys. Bye.
Naitwa Viki. Umechoka? Eh? Wewe ndio mpasua. Pole, unaitwa nani? Shamimu, pole.